President Trump's former national security advisor, Michael Flynn, will be sentenced today. Now, this is just one part of 17 investigations related to President Trump and his circle. Look at this exhaustive list. This is from a new Wired.com piece that breaks down the probes from various federal and state prosecutors and their significance. One man is behind putting this list together. The author of that piece and CNN contributor Garrett Graff joins us now. And Garrett, look, we shorthand this as the Russia investigation, but it's not just the Russia investigation. It is 17 separate, by your count, and distinct issues being looked at by several different entities here. How did it get from the Russia investigation to all of this?
Yeah, it's an interesting constellation to lay it out like this, John, because what we have seen over the last couple of weeks is sort of these back-to-back revelations about all sorts of aspects of this campaign, of these investigations and the probe into the 2016 campaign. And what we've learned sort of over these last couple of weeks, when you put it all together like this, is that we're probably thinking about this the wrong way. That we shorthand it as the Mueller probe, or as you said, the Russia probe, but it's really something that's much bigger than that. And really what this has morphed into is an examination of how foreign money and foreign influence flowed in and out of the Trump campaign, the transition, the White House, and Trump's own businesses. And so what you have now are these 17 different investigations actually run by a total of at least 7 different prosecutors, not just Mueller, but the U.S. Attorney in the Southern District of New York in Manhattan, the U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia, the U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia in Northern Virginia, which is where we saw 2 of Michael Flynn's business associates indicted yesterday for their work on behalf of the government of Turkey during the course of this campaign. And that really this is something that involves perhaps even as many as a half dozen countries and how they sought to buy influence on the Trump campaign.
Let's take that last bit first, if you will. We keep saying just Russia, but it's not just Russia. It's Russia, it's Turkey, it's UAE, it's Qatar, it's country after country after country that are as part of this investigation.
And we actually haven't seen some of these parts become public yet. We know all year that Mueller has been interested in the work of this would-be Middle Eastern power broker, George Nader, and some of the Middle Eastern work that he did, both in terms of some Russia meetings that he tried to set up, as well as you said, the UAE, Saudi Arabia, even Israel to a certain extent. And the Daily Beast has been reporting that Mueller is moving towards perhaps making some of those charges and part of that case public early next year. But that this really is a case where there's all sorts of countries that were trying to buy influence, and it appears in some cases that they were quite successful trying to buy influence from the Trump campaign.
So President Trump said to Maggie Haberman and others famously, I guess it was a year ago, that looking into his finances, into his money and his businesses would be crossing a red line. Well, we know from this list that you put together of 17, these investigations are way beyond any red line. And you note, though, that that's because Donald Trump, as a political candidate, observed no red line.
Yeah, and that is one of the sort of fascinating things that we're learning, particularly as we get deeper into Michael Cohen's plea agreements and his court cases in terms of this campaign finance violation with the hush money payments to women to cover up extramarital affairs, as well as the Trump Tower Moscow deal that he pleaded guilty to since Thanksgiving about lying to Congress over. And that really it was Donald Trump who so intermingled his businesses and his campaign and his transition and now the White House that it's impossible for prosecutors to forensically examine one without diving deep into the other.
Another aspect of this article, and I really commend, people should go read this because we can't go through all 17 here. We don't have the time, but it's so interesting to look at each one. But one of the things you note, Garrett, is in that many, if not all of them, there are separate cooperating witnesses, separate people who have either pleaded guilty or who are in agreements with prosecutors as part of their investigations.
We saw Donald Trump go over the weekend on that 10-tweet rant about rats and people cooperating with Mueller and with prosecutors, and that's obviously strange to see the president of the United States drawing on the language of mafia bosses and the heads of criminal conspiracies to complain about the rule of law and the system of justice that we have. But, one of the things that obviously is making the president nervous is when you look across those 17 investigations, there are known cooperators in almost every single one of them. Michael Cohen, of course, being a big player in many of those cases. And one of the things that should make the president and his family really nervous is that in some of these cases, it appears almost everyone else involved in the conspiracy is cooperating with investigators except for the Trump family. And that's a very dangerous place for them to be, knowing that they're probably the final targets of those probes.
Yeah, Michael Flynn, Michael Cohen, Rick Gates, and then some other names that aren't household names too caught up in it. All right, Garrett, I'm going to throw you up a softball here. How do you answer the question? Because when people read this list of 17, people invariably are going to ask you, which is the biggest threat to the president?
It's a totally fair question, and the short answer, obviously, is the campaign finance violations, because that's where we've seen the president already effectively accused as an unindicted co-conspirator. But John, I think that sort of misses the point to a certain extent. When there are 17 investigations targeting you, the problem isn't one of them, it's all of them. And it's the way that prosecutors can use leverage in one case to advance one of the other cases. And one of the things that it just is so remarkable in all of this is the sheer amount of unrelated criminality that everyone else seemingly in this campaign was involved in. Paul Manafort, Michael Flynn, Michael Cohen, that there's so much crime taking place here that prosecutors have so much leverage when they're doing this investigation of the president.
Garrett Graff, the list of 17 is in Wired. Check it out on Wired.com. Thank you so much for being with us this morning. Appreciate it, friend.
Anytime, John.